a little weird.
Located differently, but it looks good.
It's down a little bit.
Yeah, we're fine.
Yeah.
We're
I
fine.
feel like you can see more of my table than normal. It's
Yes.
probably true.
And that, oh, someone's not muted.
Why do you think
I heard some feedback, I think.
Okay.
Anyway, good morning, everybody.
We are having a time.
We are out of breath. We are running. Sorry we didn't have the link up earlier.
We're sorry for a lot of things.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. Let's just.
We do. That's what we do in our house. We don't apologize for things. Instead, we say thank you for whatever. So,
Thank you for your patience. You ready for this?
yeah, I'm ready.
Let's see. Do we have anyone here yet? Oh, we got 3 in. Good morning, y'all.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Ready? Welcome to Books We Never Read.
Except for those we have.
I'm Jason.
I'm Nicole. I'm not sure what episode this is, but we are talking about Dune, book 3 of Dune. This is our 3rd week of Dune.
And our last week.
Yeah. This might be episode 42. I'm not sure. So before we get started, please make sure that if you are watching this video, this is the video you really want to watch, because we talk about what we've read as if you've already read it as well. So we will be talking about all of Dune by
Frank.
Frank,
Not Hebert.
Frank Herbert. Frank Herbert. We'll be talking about the whole thing today, and God, we have a lot to talk about.
Is there any other things we need to say?
Sure.
Yeah.
Please like and subscribe and share our book club with anyone that you think might be interested. If you were watching the replay, join us in the discussion in the chat box. We love hearing what everyone has to say as they read the book, and especially as the new movies are coming out and everything, we might have more to say about it. It's all very exciting, and we just love being able to continue the conversation, for months and months and months to come as other people find the show and join us.
This is like the weirdest hobby I've ever been involved in, but it's a cool hobby.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's fun.
Yeah. So some
It's
other
the only
things.
time I talked to Nicole ever.
We're also on Goodreads. So if you are interested in taking the discussion off of YouTube in a more, string fashion, like a discussion string, join us over there on Goodreads at Books We Never Read. Oh, goodness.
Sorry.
That's going to be so loud in the mic. Yeah, we realized last week when I still had my cough, I about blasted out your eardrums, so sorry about that. Peggy says, thank goodness this book is over.
Well, I want to say something. My favorite thing about this book is how much Nicole likes this book. It's weird. She finished way before me and just has been going on and on and on, like, oh my god, it's so good, all this different stuff, and I had not expected that at all.
So I've been trying to think about, why. Ooh, we all just got a little prettier. I've been trying to think about why I like this book so much. I mean, I do like sci-fi in that I love Star Trek and I love a good Star War. For totally different reasons. Like I don't think you can compare them. They're totally different beasts of sci-fi, different versions, different genres or whatever. I liked Three Body. I loved Children of Time. I appreciated
the other one. The other children. The other one.
Yeah.
With the devils.
But I've been wondering, like, why do I like this book so much? But it's because it focuses on the people. You've talked before about how you love world building, that's the most interesting and fun part of reading something, is like learning about the world. This is so people oriented. We have the Bene Gesserits, and we have the Fremen, and we have the Atreides, and we have the Harkonnens, and we have the prison planet with the guys, like
Seleucus Secundus.
I don't even, that word freaks me out. Secundus, that sounds like a word that you shouldn't be saying. But I think that's why I like it so much, is that there's all these people in terms of groups and cultures, but also individual personalities that you, Frank Herbert, no, yes, really did a great job building these characters out and making them three-dimensional characters that I can attach myself to. Like, I will always wonder how Paul is doing and how Aaliyah is doing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm always going to be they're going to come up in my mind and be like, I miss them, you know?
Like, so the characters are believable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really found myself attached.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And just, you'll kind of see it. I have so many notes. I have so many things to talk about. So that'll kind of keep coming back as we talk about some of the themes and stuff from the book. Well, so what did you think about it?
I liked it. It's not my favorite thing we've read yet, right? But it might crack. It's definitely in the top 10. I don't know how much higher than that I want to go. I enjoyed it. I really did. But as far as the sci-fi goes that we've read, it's third place at best.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because I mean, Three Body changed my life, so it goes at number 1.
Really?
Yes.
Children of Time.
I did something yesterday. I was talking to some friends yesterday. We were playing a video game online, and I justified doing something because of Three Body Problem. Right? Like, it has changed my life.
Yeah. It provided, like, perspectives.
Yeah.
So it was really important in that capacity.
Yeah. And then, of course, Children of Time was just fantastic. I mean, it was so good. It just hit every note that it needed to hit. And whereas Dune felt like it could, like, drag on sometimes, I didn't have that problem there. So. Anyway, it was, so no better than third in the sci-fi genre, right?
So far.
It's probably third, but I feel like I'm also forgetting some sci-fis that we've read. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But I mean, it was fantastic. It was good. And I came into this, and I've said this before, I came into this thinking it was going to be bad because the original movie was bad.
Mm-hmm.
And the original movie was just bad.
It was so bad.
and
it had such amazing actors in it. I don't understand.
It was trying to do something before its time, before it, like, really could pull it off, you know.
Yeah, maybe it was a bad director.
Maybe. I don't know who directed it. It doesn't matter. But so the book was surprising, and I think some of why I think it's good is because it wasn't the movie, right? And so, like, there's just some bias that I've brought to the table.
No, I do think with the new movie, you know, there are some things that the new movie did that I like better than how the book did it, and then there's things that the book did that obviously I like better than what the movie is doing, but we don't really know about the movie stuff because it's not done yet, so we don't know where they're going with things.
You know, one thing that this show has really done for me that I think is cool is, you know, you always see these people who complain about, well, they changed this from the book and it's not original, and I just don't care anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't know what qualities a person has to have to, like, really care that, like, a show is not, or a movie is not true to their book. Maybe that has to be, like, the only book that you care about. But, like, I've read so many things now, and, like, I'm thinking about, like, Wheel of Time on Amazon, which was fire. They did a great job, and they changed everything. And a lot of the changes they made were great changes. You know, I'm thinking about some of the changes to Ender's Game that were good changes. Some of the changes that are in the new Dune movie, relatively small changes, but, like, they were fine. Like, there was no problem there. And I think I used to be, like, a stickler about some things.
Like, that's not how it was.
Like, that's not how it was in the book. But, like,
So, you know, given my, like, major in college, like English and literature and that kind of thing, you know, you're supposed to look at movie versions and book versions as separate works. They have separate minds behind the creation of it. One is inspired by the other, but you should look at them separately. Yeah.
Sure.
As different pieces of art. Yeah. So, yeah.
And, like, if you do either thing well, then it's fine. You know? And like, a good adaptation can save a bad book or movie or whatever. And so, like, one of the other things I'm thinking about right now is while we've been reading Dune, I also read all of the series Wool, which is what the Netflix, the Apple Plus show Silo is based on. And Silo was so good that when it ended, I didn't want it to end. So I went and read the first book. It was so good that I read the second book, which was better than either of those two things. And then the third book was fine. But the point is, like,
usually the second one's kind of the lull.
But that was another one that had a lot of adaptations in it that I bought all of them. They're great. Foundation on Apple Plus, which is back with the second season now, is incredible.
I think Wheel of Time is also back with the second season.
Not yet. I don't think so.
Really? It is.
Oh, we'll check it out. But Foundation was so good, and I'm a huge fan of the original, the whole series, and I mean, just they knocked it out of the park.
So Peggy says, I will not watch something if the book is bad. Game of Thrones and this. I'm watching Good Omens again because it was so well done.
Yep.
WOT is... Wheel of Time is next for me, though. Good Omens.
It was good. I've never read the book, though.
So we started listening to the audiobook, and it was word for word at the beginning of what season 1 was. And so we just stopped reading because we're like, you know what? The season was so good. We're good.
Anyway, obviously not what today's show is about. It would be kind of cool to just like do little mini episodes sometimes about adaptations and kind of like our thoughts on that. That'd be fun. But anyway, there's just so much good out there, and to the point, I think this show doing this has changed the way I am just much happier about seeing different kinds of literature. You've taken something that I love and you've done something different with it. And that's okay. It doesn't have to, I don't have to see the same thing over and over and over again.
Right.
Spice it up.
Yeah.
Do your hair different.
Do your hair different. So Peggy says, however, if something is based on a book, beware. Case in point, Haunting of Hill House. Nothing of the book except the names.
Oh, interesting.
And Peggy says God's narration of the show is perfect. Yeah. Very cool. So, as I was wrapping up my thoughts on Dune. I have just all kinds of thoughts. Okay, so first of all, I thought that there would be a bit more going on with Fade Rotha. That really was getting built up by the Baron. And I guess part of that is just like, the best laid plans just kind of don't work out.
You're right.
But the Baron, in book 1 of Dune, like Dune book 1, in book 1 of book 1, the Baron was terrifying. I was really afraid of like what I was going to have to see from this big slug. And he was just creepy and he was scary. And he had, Ray-Ban and he had Fade Rotha, and he was like kind of pitting them into place so that he can like build up what he's trying to do. And then by the end of it, all we get out of Fade Rotha is he got shanked and we learned he had a bastard daughter.
Yep.
The end.
I
really thought there was going to be a whole lot more about that.
But like I said before, I like when people die, right? And I like that we like got this whole character and then not really much happened, Like I think that's kind of funny, and I think it's real, right? Because I'm tired. I'm just tired of following these characters who then like become heroes or villains or whatever. And like sometimes you're like, that guy's gonna be crazy, and then he like dies in a car accident or like whatever, right? Like he doesn't become anything.
Yeah.
And he does serve, I think, an important point because that battle happens in this weird time blind spot or whatever, for
that was very
for Paul.
Interesting.
And so, there might be like some build up for some issues in like future books. I don't know.
Right. Especially with this mention of his daughter.
Yeah. So I mean it was all. I enjoyed the fight scene. He really couldn't have fought anybody else at that point because there had to be somebody who was like the best duelist or something, because otherwise there wouldn't be a fight. So
I think he is a case study in fate and the lessons that we have there. We had Paul who could see a million different scenarios, a million different futures. Like you said, this fight happened in this blind spot. We also have like the fate of the Harkonnens, the fate of the Atreides, and we also had the fate of the Bene Gesserits kind of all pitted here in this one spot.
And the Imperial family.
And the Imperial and none of it turned out the way anybody thought that it would. Right. So that is kind of interesting that he was just a pawn in this exploration of fate and how that works when you do have people who can see into the future and a future that obviously is inevitable in there somewhere. And then everybody trying to control their little piece of that. So that is kind of interesting when you look at it that way.
Well, and you have all this stuff like we're kind of led to believe that the Harkonnens are destroyers, right? They're willing to kill anybody and do all kinds of nonsense. And the Imperial family has the Sardaukar, and they are destroyers. And Feyd-Rautha is a destroyer, right? He battles people. But in the end, they're all so attached to their little things that they are small destructions, And then Paul comes out swinging with this like sword holder stuff from we just talked about it. Why can't I do this ever? The first book we ever read.
Three Body.
Yeah, Three Body, right? He came out sword holder style and was just like, I'll nuke this planet, right? Well, I can never remember the name when I need it. I'll just nuke this planet.
Yeah.
And I'm not joking. I'm going to die. Yeah, you guys are going to die. All your planets are going to be stuck by themselves. Space is gone, right? You're on your own now. And I didn't see it coming, even though we had this conversation several times about whoever can destroy a thing controls it. And I didn't see it. I didn't predict it. And then when it happened, I was like, oh, like obviously, right? But I think that's what's interesting, right? Is because we've been shown the Atreides as, they will forget about equipment and save the men, right? They are saviors, where the Harkonnens are destroyers. And in the end, Paul has to become the destroyer of worlds, right? Dunenheimer.
Oh no. And talking about who can destroy the thing controls it. The force in this universe that is trying to become the controlling force of the universe are the Bene Gesserit.
Right.
And he now has the ability to destroy them.
Yeah. Right?
He's the Kwisatz Haderach. And he can go into the blind spot of the Bene Gesserit mind thing.
And his sister can do some weird stuff.
Right. So between his sister and him, the Bene Gesserit has all of these plans planted everywhere so that they can always be a controlling force, and so that ultimately they can seat someone as the controller of the universe.
Right.
But they are controlling that controller, right? And Paul is able to see through those plans, understand the plan, and defy the plan.
Right.
He can use all of their power without complying with their demands. He has the ability to destroy the Bene Gesserit.
Right.
And thus he can control it.
Well, and one of the options too was for him to kill Feyd-Rautha and himself, right? Like he was just like, we're just all gonna die.
Yeah.
And then thousands of years of genetic breeding are just gone because you don't have like the right people left. And like my son is dead now. He has this like random daughter hanging out or whatever. She'll probably come back, right? That's one of those like Chekhov guns things.
Wait,
where
Feyd-Rautha.
Feyd-Rautha has a random daughter. Yeah.
I also thought it was really interesting that we learned Count Finning is Paul.
What?
That they were talking about how, like, Paul and Finning, he was Finning's the guy that, like, he was not existent in any of his visions. And when they looked at each other, they recognized that they were the same thing, that they were, like, bred to be the Kwisatz Haderach.
Yeah. So whenever I saw... So he's not literally Paul, but could have been. And just last week, we had this conversation about, well, it could have been Harry or Neville that got picked and could have been... And that's exactly what this is. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And they look at each other and they're just like, we can't fight each other. We're twins.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool.
How weird. Yeah. What a weird thing to throw in there. There were like 20 fast facts that happened right here in the last 30 minutes of the book. And I was like, this is a whole other novel.
Yeah, it hit hard. Yeah.
I felt like by the time it ended, so much happened in book 3 of book 1 of Dune, but not enough happened for it to really end.
Right.
So when it ended, I was just like, are you kidding me? I was driving and screaming, are you kidding me? Oh, man. We need to get caught up on chat.
Yeah, so Peggy says the Count wasn't picked because of his eunuch status. And that's true, right? Because ultimately, he couldn't pass on his genetics. This also reminds me of... And sci-fi is so incestuous, right? Like when you think about it, just like in the recurring ideas.
Right.
But this is so much like Darth Vader, right? And when you think about Star Wars, there's this whole chosen one concept, which does not exist at all in the original 3 movies.
Yeah.
And then you're introduced to it in episode 1. Anakin is the chosen one. But then he doesn't do anything ever. right? And then the last three movies still have to happen, and so then it's a question of like, well, is he like really the chosen one, or like is it like Luke, or what's going on, right? And so I kind of felt that here, where there's like a little bit of hedging of bets, right? Like maybe he is, but like this is crazy, but maybe the next thing is like the thing, you know what I mean? Like it's really going to be my kids or whatever. I don't know. So yeah, and you told me that somebody told me that the Jedi were actually based on the Bene Gesserit.
Greg Fox.
Greg Fox told us that. Yeah,
One of our members.
Yeah. So, yeah, that was kind of interesting.
So another thing that I think is interesting in terms of the characters is, Paul as the main character. Paul is the hero. Mm-hmm. When you compare him to other sci-fi, how does he compare to Luoji? How does he compare to Luke Skywalker? Like the way that he tackles his fate, his upbringing, and where he ends up, the way he tackles all these things is much different from other sci-fi main characters, heroes.
Yeah. Well, both Luigi and Luke Skywalker were like peasant children, right? Like they were nobodies, and they allude several times to like Paul is one of those deadly people in the universe anyway because his teachers were deadly, and like so he came up as a certain way. He's also colder, maybe not. I mean, Luigi ends up pretty cold, but because he like loses himself, right? He is not a person anymore.
Yeah.
For all the trouble they went to make sure that he was a human being and not a monkey or whatever, he sure is like not that anymore.
Yeah. So, but I think Chani humanizes him.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
Like,
yeah. That's like his like last connection, really.
Yeah.
Because he understands that his mom.
Yeah. Sorry.
Like his mom is using him.
Right.
And so like that kind of he respects her, but he doesn't have that connection. Chani is like the last person he's got that is not part of the web,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He can't even mourn the loss of his son until he sees Chani. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty powerful. I mean, that is a clear indication of here is final form Paul, who is this Bene Gesserit thing, and also Duke. Yeah. He's split between two very different worlds. Well, three, the Fremen, so three very different worlds. Barely human, but Chani elicits that response in him.
Yeah, the only thing, I don't know, maybe it's because of fate, right? And so like things are just kind of like predetermined. He doesn't have a choice. But when they were going to, so obviously the Bene Gesserit are trying to have the Kwisatz Haderach. His mama thinks that that's what he is. The head lady comes and it's like, I don't know, maybe they have to go to Dune. There's some political stuff that's like beside the point, but also like this is a great place to make a Kwisatz Haderach because there's all the spice and everything. But then like once he gets there and once things go south and he's like living in the desert with some other people, he could have just quit. Like he could have just been like, I'm not going to do that anymore, right? Like I'm not going to become this thing that you want me to become.
He did do that.
But even in the end, like he's like, I'm going to keep playing this political game. And
so that
anything that happens from now on is his fault, right? Because like he could have just like gone into the desert and been like a weird guru or something, right? Like
but then he has this feeling of terrible purpose, right?
Yeah, and I guess that's where like if all this had happened to me and my family was killed and somebody was trying to turn me into a superhuman thing and then I was like, I'm king of the desert people, I'd just stay king of the desert people. Yeah.
But then he knew this, this war would wage on and...
Yeah. But like how much of that war is coming because of the actions he's taking right now?
Right.
If he just refused to leave his house, would it happen?
But he even acknowledged that before he was even able to recognize how much control he had, the jihad was going to happen either way. Mm-hmm. He could die and die a legend and be, this sanctified thing that is the reason for people's fight, right? Or he could not die and be this legend that's indestructible.
Yeah. I don't know. I think like he had the opportunity to get himself out. He chooses not to, I guess. Either the Bene Gesserit are so clever that they have like made things in such a way that whenever this guy came about, his life was just like down the tube, and that was the way he was going to go.
I think that the Bene Gesserit planted so much in the like culture consciousness of Dune.
Yeah.
They planted so much intending for him to become, this thing that they placed on the throne.
But like he goes to Dune almost accidentally, right? Like
it was not accidentally.
Were the Bene Gesserit like really involved in the
yes, that
trickery of
Reverend
that?
Mother was whispering in that Emperor's ear, let's make Duke Leto be the thing. And that's why at the very beginning she was like, we don't see a future for Duke Leto.
Yeah.
He's gone. He's out of the picture before he even gets started. They had that planned from the beginning.
But they hadn't even like assessed Paul until after the plan is to
They had that planned from the beginning.
Maybe so.
When that baby boy was born, they knew Jessica broke the rules.
But that goes even more to my point, right? Like, so if Paul is just like locked and loaded, they're gonna blast him off, and there's this is the only way it's ever gonna end for him. I'm finding that out, right? Like, he's gonna kill himself, like whatever, right? Whatever it takes to like not have to live this like predetermined plan.
But there's still that part of Paul that cares about keeping power in check and protecting people, and not allowing for some other worse power to be destroying the people, right? Like, so with him kind of following the Bene Gesserit way, but then like taking control of it, like, I'm not going to do what this Reverend Mother wants me to do. I'm going to do this my way with the power that I have. That protected the Fremen.
Yeah.
Because there was still Muad'Dib part of him that had obligations to the Fremen. There was Duke part of him that was going to carry on some obligations for like the Imperial stuff. He found a way. I mean, he was a divided person, and he found a way to use those divisions to protect the interests he cared about. How crazy. This book was so complicated.
See, Peggy says they plan to inbreed the Fade kid with Paul to make the snack attack, but Paul was a male, right? So yeah, if there was supposed to be an Atreides daughter, and they were gonna breed those together, when he first does drugs, he tells his mom he's something different. Then his high isn't enough, so he decides to OD, and then suddenly he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm the snack attack."
I'm the Cuisinart snack attack.
Well, and then like that wasn't enough, right? Like, that first time he had to go back and like hang out with a tiny worm for 3 weeks or whatever.
Yeah, that was weird.
That part was kind of weird.
That was weird. And so, okay, so genre-wise, this is kind of interesting. It is sci-fi. It's also an epic, right? Like, he visited the underworld.
Yes.
He took his 3-week journey into dead worm territory. Peggy also said, even the Baron's death, that was super quick, very like anticlimactic, but it was awesome that Aaliyah was like, "What's up, Grandpa? Here's my Gonja bar."
Yeah. So I didn't pick up on this, but Nicole says that kid was like 3 or 4 years old.
The last like age indication they gave was the Princess Irulan was like, it was in year 3 of the Desert War when blah 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 blah. So like, I mean, she was a kid, she was a toddler.
One of the scariest subgenres of horror is horror baby horror, right? Like, that's scary. Like whenever there's like a possessed baby or something, I'm not here for those. Those are really scary. And so whenever you said that, I was like, no, I don't need this. Because for some reason, the baby in my mind looks like Federaltha. And it's just like a blonde, like a pale, bald child.
She's a toddler at best.
No thanks.
Yeah. And like leading, raids in the war with her crysknife, and so that they call her Saint Aaliyah of the Knife. I mean, she was shanking everybody up in there. It was crazy. She was so cool. The Bene Gesserit, Peggy says, the Bene Gesserit plan to inbreed the Federaltha kid with Paul to make the snack attack. Okay, but Paul was male. Got it. Okay, I didn't understand when you read that, but now I understand what they're saying. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You brought up the epic thing. It'd be fun to do an episode just talking about the hero's journey and Joseph Campbell and all that. Just talking.
I'm not well versed in the hero's journey. It never meant a whole lot to me. Like, once I read I'm like, okay. I love a good like theme and like template and like being able to pick apart a story because of how it's laid out. Yeah. It just never did it for me. I would love to sit in on that discussion.
Well, let's do it.
I would learn a lot.
Cool.
Yeah, so Peggy confirmed she was 3.
Scary.
It's so cool. Well, and in the old school Dune movie, she is a wee one.
I don't remember.
She's a wee babe.
I don't know that I've ever made it all the way to the
So
end.
I because I was so interested in Aaliyah, I did look up some like, what's the like Geekopedia type thing, you know, the little wikis with like geekdom stuff. Anyway, so I was reading more about Saint Aaliyah of the Knife. Her fate is, I mean, you know, she was doomed from the beginning just because how she was born, and that she, before she created her own personal identity, had the identity of all these former Reverend Mothers within her.
Right.
And so I did read a thing that says that a child born in after that process happens, like Jessica was supposed to terminate that pregnancy because that child is an abomination, because that child didn't form their own personality, and they are more likely to be possessed by one of those personalities that's within her now.
Nice.
So if you're interested in reading further, that's a little hint about what is to come.
No. Please, sir. No.
Just saying. Just saying. Oh, and she has a lisp. Well, because she's only 3. It mentions that her palate's not formed yet. That's why little kids kind of have a lisp. Their palate's still too soft or whatever. Yeah, she was itty bitty. Anyways.
Continue on, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I have Aaliyah. What a kid. That's in my notes.
It literally says that.
Shelby says she agrees with Jason that baby horror can sit right next to the White Walkers from Game of Thrones. Shelby, are you back from Normandy? I don't see you on here.
Maybe they're all hanging out.
Yeah, maybe. I hope everything went well. Okay, so Howitt's death. We saw him long enough for Paul to like hold him in his arms. Howitt poisoned himself.
Howitt was poisoned.
He was being poisoned the whole time.
Right, he didn't have the antidote.
Okay.
So the poison is in him. It's being held at bay by the antidote. When he leaves the Harkonnens, he doesn't have the antidote anymore, so the poison just eventually gets him. So.
But he died in Paul's arms?
Yeah, well, that part where he like almost killed Jessica, and then Paul was like, he was like, I love you.
That's...
Oh, sorry, yeah, you're right. I'm getting the characters wrong. But yeah, that's
I'm
still
talking about
Howitt is the one who's poisoned. Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, different.
Okay, but no, let's talk about Gurney.
Yeah, whenever he was going to kill Jessica, and Paul was just like, I love you. I'll always love you. I'm going to kill you now. I respect that.
Yeah.
I just, like, look, man, I love you.
But
like,
we have to end this, and you can't kill
be
my
around
mom
anymore. Yeah. Like, you're a liability.
So, yeah, I got really stressed out when Paul's worlds were colliding. You know, we have Gurney Halleck back. We still had Stilgard. Both men who hold Paul in a level of esteem because of their leadership skills and who they are.
Yeah.
But totally different worlds, right? I mean, like one's the Duke world, one's the Fremen world.
Yeah. Well, they're both like his right hand, and so there's this jealousy thing kind of happening.
Yeah.
You know? Like, Gurney is the ex-girlfriend, right? Like, it was like you're from a life before, and what are you doing here now, kind of thing. And they all end up getting along enough, but
yeah, but you know, we did get a little bit of like internal thoughts from Paul that as this desert war was raging on, Stilgard's view of Paul was changing into more of a role of worship rather than battle mate, you know, type thing. And so he was also worried about how Gurney Howitt was going to change his view of Paul. Like, you know, how does he see me now? Now that he sees me, like, ruling the Fremen and leading them, you know, is he going to see me differently? And we see Gurney saying a couple of things that kind of shows how his view of Paul is changing. Like, since when did you care more about supplies than people?
Yeah.
And so you see this disappointment. Paul's becoming his own man.
Yeah.
You know, he's not his father, and sometimes he's more like his grandfather, which finally we understand why that picture of the bull horns or whatever was so important.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of who Paul's becoming.
Well, and it's a very Fremen thing to not care about the individual, right? It's the good of the tribe above all else. They say that many times. And not only that, but I would argue that like the individual is supplies to the Fremen, right? Like
Right.
they're a big walking water bag. So I mean, it makes sense that his opinion changes in that way.
Yeah. But it was hard, from Paul's point of view, I can see how that is a scary moment for someone that you respect so much to see you in the new role that you're in, where the world is different.
Yeah.
The standards are different. Because he cares so much about Gurney and just how that image holds up.
Yeah. In the first week, maybe the second week, we had that conversation about like morality and like the Harkonnens are bad people and bad situations make bad people or whatever. And in a lot of cases, the ability or the to have a moral system that cares about like the rights of individuals and individuals at all is something that you can only have in a society that has plenty, right?
A very privileged society.
Yeah, I mean, and so the Fremen morality comes from their difficult situation. They don't, and Caladan was a paradise world, and so it's interesting to see how his I'm going to call it his economic situation changes, and therefore his moral system changes.
And the little excerpts from the Princess Irulan's writings and stuff, one of those writings was a quote from Paul saying, that on Caladan they had gotten lazy and cushy and because things were not hard for them.
Right.
And that weakened them.
Yeah.
Overall.
Yeah. It's so interesting how that happens, right? I mean, and that happens everywhere. You have to create false hardship to stay hard, And plenty of people do that, right? They work out, or you have to choose to do difficult things when you're not forced to do difficult things. Not because it's like good in and of itself, but because it's like a survival skill. When you can't.
You've got to keep your brain flexed for like panic mode, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I really also like just about the book overall. These little excerpts from the Princess Irulan at the beginning of each chapter. It was really distracting to me at first, and I didn't like her voice in the audiobook, and I didn't know who she was, and so I was just like, what are you even talking about? But I was trying to like listen to what she was saying, because obviously she had these collections of who she saw Paul as.
Right.
And even though I didn't know who she was until the end, I'm like, oh, that's going to be his wife.
Right.
But all of those little excerpts kind of dug into my brain. And then as I was reading things later, I was like, oh, well, there's that little snippet of insight that we had gotten from a third party.
Yeah.
And then you can also see how, and I thought this was really interesting, one of Paul's kind of complaints throughout the whole book was like, well, after this event, here's this new legend of me, and that's not even true. That's not even what happened, but this is what the people are going to say about me for centuries. And those things were showing up in the like stories from Princess Irulan as well.
That's a hard part, I think, of those excerpts were about world building more than anything, right? And I said this before, I think that sometimes people just like info dump, or there's no good way to get that world building in there. And I think this is like a classy way to do it, right? Just have this little excerpt, and like, here's the history, and then you keep going, and then later you can piece it all together without having some like random character, like Gandalf's not riding on his horse and everybody's hanging out, and then he's like, 30 years ago, like, who cares?
Yeah. And kind of back to that point where Paul would talk about like, oh, well, this is how the people are going to remember this forever, and he's kind of annoyed about it. Just a motif in general, or a theme in general, you can't control your own legacy. You can control your actions and how you live your life, but you can't control how other people interpret what you've done. And so what lives on when you're gone, it's just out of your control, but we do seem to care so much about that legacy that we leave. We talked about that in Three Body as well. Just the harshness of, what's the legacy after a generation? Nobody remembers it. Like, you're buried, you're gone, and then your grave is destroyed. And, so that's just an interesting theme to kind of follow.
I've long had this like idea, kind of, that like just noodles around in my brain sometimes, about like, people like to think of who they are, but I'm not. But that's like a weird way to think of it, because you are not anything. You are becoming. Like you are
very Aristotle of
you are a process, right? You aren't a final product.
Everything is becoming. Nothing is.
I don't know.
That's very
I'm not a fan of Aristotle.
Well, you're quoting them.
And so, but like you are once you die. But even then, you are not, because that thing changes. That legacy changes as well, right? But like you are done with your contribution at that point, and so like whatever you are, that is kind of it. But then that thing continues to change until it finally becomes nothing, when nobody remembers you. And so like I kind of think about like legacy like that. It's interesting, and he says, well, that's not what I am, but you don't
get to control
and what you are is different in every person's mind, right? Because what I am in my mind is very Joseph Campbell, hero with a thousand faces, right? Everybody is their own hero, and in other people's mind, like you're like a third-rate character or whatever, right? Like you are just a sidekick, or something like that. And whatever you are only exists in a mind, right? Whether it be your own or somebody else's.
Just kind of like a real world scenario with this, what's the legacy and how it changes according to whoever's thinking about that legacy. I've been spending a lot of time with my family lately, now that my papa has passed away. And, I have these memories of my mama and my papa and my great grandmother, and lots of just cool memories and stuff. And so there is the vision I have of them that I have built. But I'm learning so many other stories, I don't want to say good and bad, but of all flavors.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how I'm, like, in my mind, it's like physically twisting and turning as I'm trying to reshape these people that I know and that I, admire so much, because I adore these family members of mine, the ones that have passed. But they can't control the legacy that they've left behind in my mind.
Right.
I'm getting these bits and pieces of stories and twisting those into things that I can learn. And how can I use the best of who they were to become my best self too? They weren't trying to do all that. They were just living. They weren't thinking what's my great granddaughter going to take from this life lesson that I've had? No, they were just trying to survive.
Right.
But I'm the one twisting and creating these legends of people,
Well, and does it even matter really if the legacy that ends up being the thing you're remembered for is true or not? Like, does it really matter? And I'm not sure it does.
That's a great point.
And so I think about we have these American saints, and they are all the founding fathers, and half of the stuff we talk about is not real.
It's not real. It's not true. It didn't happen.
But it doesn't matter. Because we all agree they were a mixed bag, right? At best.
Right.
They were a mixed bag at best.
Yeah.
But ignoring who the real person was, which should not be ignored, right? We need to talk about that and think about that, and that's important. But then taking the myth that they are and the thing that they represent and what we say, therefore, that we want to be, even though they were not that thing, that is still helpful.
Right.
Recognize the history for what it is and work on that bit, but then saying the whole, or whoever it was, George Washington chopped down a cherry tree or whatever, whatever that story is. I don't know. It's supposed to say something to people, right?
Right.
So, but we have these, and that's what saints are also, right?
Was that
Religious
Abe Lincoln?
saints. No, that was definitely George Washington.
I thought it was about the honesty thing that he told on himself for chopping down the tree.
I think it's George Washington. It doesn't matter. I picked the worst possible story. Right?
It's fine.
But they're saints, right? And we have these saints in religion as well, where they went off and did all these things, which was questionable.
Yeah, when you really look up the stories of some of these people, they were
bad. Okay. But that story's nice, right? And you can aspire to be that thing.
Yeah, but they're but she healed, 50 people in her town, and you're like, "Aw, just don't read the other part."
Yeah.
No, but that's because humans are storytellers, right? We carry on our knowledge and our secrets to survival through stories, and so that's why we think of things like that, and that's why we build up these saints and these legends in our mind, because that's easier to tell stories about.
Yeah. Well, and that's I don't see stories as being all that different from like life. And like thinking about Joseph Campbell and like life is myth. It just is. And there are these interesting like milestones that everybody goes through, right? And like psychology background, right? So people have, you know, like these different stages of development that they go through. And everybody goes through their teenage years, and everybody goes through loss of friends and at the end of their lives, and you know, all these different things that you go through. And so because we have these common occurrences, we all have these common stories, and all of our stories are just slightly branched from this like one thread that runs through. And um and the way that you think about all those things, and what that story becomes is it's all based on that one thing. And I think Dune is a really cool version of that, I guess. You know, it kind of explores all those things, like all stories do, I suppose.
Right, yeah.
But
Let's get caught up on chat for a minute.
yeah, sure.
We've got a lot. So Shelby's in Germany.
Cool.
And she has a bad connection. Aw, Shelby, we miss you. Okay, but then he didn't kill him.
That was talking about how he didn't kill Gurney.
Oh.
Paul. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he didn't do it, but his mom kind of talked him out of it, I guess.
Well, because it was a misunderstanding.
Yeah. But like, I don't know. I don't like to gamble. You're not staying around.
And that poor girl, what a craptastic life she's going to have. I felt bad for her. Write my history, but no, I don't give a darn about you.
Yeah.
But Princess Irulan,
Yeah.
And so I was kind of thinking this as I was wrapping up the book, especially given the last couple of lines of the book. Who would you rather be? The wife or the concubine?
In all cases, the concubine has had a better deal. In all cases. Jessica was a concubine. And I guess there was no wife in that, but like, you know.
But, you know, the space was being saved for the wife. And then, let's see, Peggy says, the cartoon movie Book of Life does that. Unless someone remembers you, you don't exist. Oh, no, that was Coco. Yes, yeah. And Jason has not seen
Isn't
Coco.
that about like a parrot or something?
No.
Okay.
And it is so good. And we're going to have to watch it because it does tie in really well to that. That, you know, it's your...
Okay.
It's the memories that keep us alive. And then Peggy says Bible people couldn't get their stories straight. And Peggy was just talking about stories this morning. She was telling her uncle about Anansi. Yeah. What a great tie-in!
Yeah, that is good. That is really good.
Oh man, I really want to read another Neil Gaiman. Yeah, we need to figure something out.
Well, and that I don't know. I mean, like off topic, but kind of on topic. And that's what's cool about reading so much lately is you get to live other lives.
Yes.
Right? And
vicarious experiences are one of the most important things that we gain from reading.
When you get upset that a book is over because you want it to keep going, you are upset because you have died, right? Like that is like that life is over for you, and you have to come back and do this thing. I was talking to my brother yesterday about like AI and stuff like that, and how about like the possibility of making a totally artificial universe. And that's how I know that we don't live in an artificial universe, is because I wouldn't pick this one, right? Like,
well, you might have just been stuck in this,
right? Like, there are some cool things here, but like, have you read? Right? Like,
there's a really great Star Trek Next Generation episode about that, where Moriarty is in a simulation, but he gains sentience, and they kind of have to have a discussion of, he's like, well, don't just power down the simulation. Don't make me sit in limbo forever. Yeah. So they power up a simulation for him so that he can do his bad guy thing for eternity. And they save it down into like a little disc, you know, a little cube, data cube. And he's just living his whole existence in this simulation.
I like to think that this is either the last one, that, I'm doing this for the achievement, or you know, maybe this was like the new one, and everybody's like, oh, you got to go to Earth, right? Like,
no, who is it? Spinoza or Leibniz, who says that we live in the best of all possible worlds.
Right. Well, so and I agree with that for semantic reasons. I agree with that because we live in the only possible world. Right? And that was his point, right? His point wasn't like we live in the best of all possible worlds, because that's dumb.
Well, all the possibilities, he created a whole world.
We live in the best of all possible worlds because it is the only possible world, or it's the
one that exists.
Right?
It's the one that we have, so it's the best of all possibles.
Yeah,
because it's the only one we have. Yeah.
Anyway, we have a comment from somebody I don't recognize.
Wazara Limbu, read read the book 5 years ago and loved it. Enjoyed.
Good.
Oh, thank you. They enjoyed us covering the book and gave them a chance to revisit it. And yeah, that's one of our favorite things is that we're able to hang on to all the books that we've read because we keep getting new comments and getting to share the experience with people. Okay, so another thing I love about Dune, and we talked about this in week 1 because it came up in week 1, the litany against fear.
Yes.
I will tell you guys, I was on a ladder yesterday, cleaning out a gutter, saying the litany against fear because I was on a ladder. And everyone's laughing, but like that really has, and I learned the litany against fear from Jason, so way before I ever watched or read Dune. It has changed that part of my life, the anxiety part of my life. Yeah. It's changed how I manage it. And it really does help.
Well, I mean, it's good, right? And like, is it something that some like random sci-fi writer wrote and put it into a magazine once? Yes, it is. But like, so what?
But it's
actually very close. That there's a real prayer that is very similar. I'm gonna have to find it for you guys.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. But it helps me visualize the thing that's causing me anxiety or fear, and process it in an appropriate way because it will pass, and I will remain at the end of it.
Yeah, I'm very interested in like Stoicism as like a general philosophy and not in like the boring you can't have emotions kind of way, but like I feel like
as a way to handle.
I feel like I've thought about it enough that like I have a nuanced approach to it that is not just lame. But that prayer really speaks to that part as well, right? And there's, I have a habit of doing things to alleviate anxiety, right? We all do. You have anxiety, so you're gonna go do this thing. But then like one of the things that prayer helps you realize is like, oh, nothing is happening except in my head. If I just don't, then nothing happens. You know, in the end, I will remain, and nothing will have changed.
Right.
Somebody will send me an email, and I'm like, oh, they're mad at me. Or they said I did a bad job. I need to go and do whatever. Like I just get these things happening to me, and I'm like, I'm gonna send them this email, and I'll type it out, and then I'll be like, I am doing this because of the way that I feel.
Right.
And I will delete it, and I will walk away for 3 hours, and later I'll be like, I just don't care anymore.
Right.
And then you know what happens? No one remembers that even happened in a week, right?
Yeah.
How often, because of fear, do we cause like the story of our lives to move on and then to take a different path? And it could have just not progressed if we just hadn't.
Max Ehrman's Desiderata also has a good comment about, the catastrophes we create ourselves because of fear. Yeah. It's just unnecessary. Yeah. But yeah. It's a nice mantra to have. Let's see what else we got. In the Bene Gesserit appendix, there's a line where it says machines cannot replace man. Yeah, and that related to the Hollywood strike and stuff like that. Okay, so I missed the Bene Gesserit appendix, I think.
It's not in the audiobook.
I need to go back and read that.
Yeah, we'll check that out.
Because I am interested in reading, like continuing the series myself, the Bene Gesserit portion of it.
Well, don't go on. Let's come back around to it. We'll pick another book. Maybe one that's not like in the full series, but
like the little side
attached to. Yeah, that'd be cool.
I want to do the Bene Gesserit one. Yeah, they're so cool because like this religion is so interesting. The institution of it is so interesting. The control that is so necessary for these religions to thrive. The purpose of a religion to protect the people. It really is out of protection, but it is also out of control. It is selfish and it is continuing. It is life-giving and it is also destructive. Yeah. The Bene Gesserit has all of that, plus they are also magical. And that's so cool, right? Like, so it is this like made up stuff, made up rules just to serve themselves. But also there's something like actually going on. Yeah. They can control their own little like molecules and they can use the voice to like make people do stuff. And like, I think so cool.
The combination of obviously, it's for most of human history, priests were wizards, right? Like that is just the way it was. And we still kind of have that, but we look at it skeptically and especially in America because most people are Protestant, your priest is not a wizard.
Right.
But in a lot of other religions, your priest is still a wizard, right?
Yeah,
Like,
most religions do have like a magical.
yeah, they have that, and like I miss
Kind of
that. Like I think that's cool, and like I wish it was real, right? Like I'm here for
Yeah.
magic. Let's do magic, right? But one, I guess, and you're right. Like I think that's what attracts me to the Bene Gesserit is that I'm fascinated by religion, and I just think magic's cool, but like religion is what substitutes for that in our world, you know. And like I feel like that's part of the aspect that is missing in something like Harry Potter, right? Like they have this power, but they have like no framework that I've ever introduced to about like where it comes from and how it works and like what is like how did you guys not get religious about this, right? Like how did that happen? That's not possible, right? Like I want to know, you know. I like when people combine those things. So.
Yeah. Also, and I know that we are hitting an hour, but at the beginning of book 3 of book 1 of Dune, was Paul riding the worm.
Yeah.
And we didn't even talk about that.
So
How
I'm pretty
crazy.
sure. So they do that, right? Like some of the more powerful Fremen or whatever ride worms.
Yeah. Well, because Jessica was like, "Did I just see what I thought I
Yeah.
saw?" She's like, "But that wasn't." Mirage.
So if I'm not mistaken, we get to see that in the next movie.
Cool.
I think there's a shot in the trailer of Paul riding a worm.
I was so frustrated. Like, we're building up to this part. Paul's about to, like, hook his little worm. The scene changes to go over to Jessica. And I'm like, no, go back. Like, not now, Jessica.
In my my little Dune game that I've talked about that I play sometimes, if you're playing as the Atreides or the Harkonnens or whatever, you can put your guys in a little spaceship and fly them over and drop them back off. But if you play as the Fremen, you summon a worm and you ride.
Oh, cool. Neat. I forgot about that little game. Okay, I think we have made it through all 3 pages of my notes.
All right. So you liked it, obviously. We talked about it for an hour. That's really great. I know that not everybody in the audience liked it because our audience tends to comprise of one. But you know, I think this is an important sci-fi book for us to read because as we read other sci-fis, you know, it's going to be. I mean, it's one of the granddaddies, right? Like you got to do it. You got to.
I'm really glad we read it.
Cool. Well, I would like to definitely do some more of it in the future. And I have some other thoughts we can talk about later for like fantasy type books that are adjacent to some of the things that you and I have already read. That might be kind of cool.
Cool.
So.
We do have one more comment, and please make sure anyone who's watching, if you've got anything else you want to add, please add it real quick before we go. But Peggy says it comes from spice. Paul says so. Even the guild people are spice addicts. They're all on drugs. So the moral of this book,
Don't do drugs.
don't do drugs. Look, I'm not going to lie. The spice sounds lovely.
Yeah.
Cinnamony.
I don't know, man. I don't want to get my mind blown.
I do.
It sounds... Talk about things that cause anxiety.
That would be, yeah. That
I
would be a lot
lose
to
my
handle.
sense of place and time, and I don't need to be the Cuisinart snack attack. I just don't need to be it. I don't want all that. Sounds like a lot of responsibility.
Though.
Out here trying to prevent a
and
jihad.
I'm not just gonna like go out and like do a drug. You know, but if I'm living on a planet where it's just like baked into the atmosphere, so like by visiting, I'm just like enlightened.
Yeah.
Seems
Yeah,
nice.
that's cool.
It reminds me of, you know, in the Odyssey when the Lotus Eaters, the land of the Lotus Eaters, they're all just like chomping on their lotus, and all the men forget like that they're supposed to be going home.
Well, Zara says it comprises of at least 2, and we appreciate you being here. We do. We really do. We actually have a lot of viewers today, which is kind of cool. So, and so what's weird about this is that after this one, we're going to take a total 180, right? And we're going into
A Ren Fair romance
novel. Which I'm actually really excited.
Yay!
I just am. You know, Dune was a lot of fun, and while Dune is something that you probably never would have read on your own, this next book is something I would never read on my own. And I think that's what's really cool about doing this is like I am committing to reading things I wouldn't read, and I'm choosing to enjoy them.
Right.
Because if you weren't doing this as part of a group, how often would you be like, you know what? I just read Dune, and now I'm going to go read this. Right. Like, you just wouldn't choose that.
No, when you're on your own, you kind of just stick in your genre, you know.
Well, but I mean, like, and I love just being able to pull from different things. I am ready to take Well Met by Jen DeLuca and make her Dune reference. Y'all be ready.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
You heard it here first.
So. All right, y'all. It is 1101.
Wow. Okay. We appreciate you guys sticking around for so long. That was a big one. If you want to read the next book with us, we're going to put the syllabus out for it in the next 10 minutes or so.
Yeah.
We got to make it.
we got to figure it out first.
And we appreciate all the new folks who came in today.
Yeah,
Anybody
thank
who
you
watched
so
but didn't say
much.
anything, we appreciate you guys being here. But say something next time.
Yeah,
Just at
please
least say
join
hello.
us. Yes. And real quick, this week in literary history, I didn't look anything up except tomorrow is Harry Potter's birthday.
We'll see you next week.
The boy who lived.
The boy who lived twice.
Also Neville.
It's his birthday.
And my great-grandmother's.
Cuisinart Snack Attack.
Bye! This is my golden jar.